Actually, the natural sleep time for a teenager is around 11 p.m.
Right.
So, of course, if you're starting school at 7:20 a.m., you don't have 9 hours to sleep and also get ready for school, right? So that's the inherent conflict right there. Knowing that delayed school start times can contribute to the betterment of sleep quality and subsequently their mental health, I want to kind of talk about what are some of the forces that's fighting against a later start to the school day. Logan, any guesses?
The forces fighting against a later start to the school day. I guess I kind of touched on it earlier, like parental needs. There's a lot of parents that do need that kind of, in a sense, right, babysitting component of what a high school provides so that they can go to school and, they can go to work and not have to worry about where their kids are going. We saw this in COVID. Parents had to figure out where these kids would be going when they couldn't go into school. Outside of that, my mother was a teacher, so I'm all too familiar with teachers' unions. But I would think that the teachers' unions would want to see delayed times. I mean, it would be, if I was a teacher, I'd be stoked if I could show up a little bit later in the day. I do think there's some concerns. Does this mean then that the school day has to be pushed out longer because we're starting it later in the day too? I wanted to actually do a case or talk about one high school in particular that was offering some solutions around that, but I'll get into that later. So what are the forces pushing against delaying school starts times?
Okay, so the first thing I wanted to touch on, and I'm kind of piggybacking off your points about, the role of the school as this quote-unquote babysitter, right, is actually, so the school day, there's a fundamental mismatch between school times and the American workday, right? The workday goes until 5 to 6 p.m. And the way that schools are structured right now, generally by 3 p.m. students are done with their school day. So that leaves a period of 3 hours of unsupervised time for a lot of American families out there. And actually, this is actually called the danger time zone. And it's been pretty well documented that during this 3 hour time span, we have, a lot of families will put their children into extracurricular activities, whether that be additional education or even stuff like sports. And the issue there is especially affects children from lower socioeconomic backgrounds who necessarily don't have access to such after-school activities. And when you don't have access to those activities and you're essentially home by yourself as a teenager during the hours of 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., it's well documented that window, that 3 hour period, is a big contributor to substance abuse and crime rates for adolescent population. So one of the factors contributing against this push for delayed school time is actually a lack of funding, right? To be able to push that school time back and cover schools until 5 to 6 p.m., we would effectively have to extend the hours a little bit. And there's a lot of pushback, from funding, because already schools are kind of underfunded in our country. But the issue with that is, like I said, it affects children from lowest socioeconomic backgrounds the most, because people with the means are effectively subsidizing the school system already, because they're paying out of pocket for their children to be in extracurriculars. So when we talk about inequities of healthcare, perhaps this is one major area where it can be addressed. So that's the first one, Logan. The second thing, you talked about unions. So it's actually not the teachers' unions, but it's the bus unions that are against this change. And a big part of that reason is, Logan, the way the bus system is designed right now, they don't have separate buses for high schools, junior high schools, and elementary schools. They have staggered start times so that one bus will go pick up the high school students, then the junior high school students, then the elementary school students. And of course, we have concerns about the youngest of our, patients in the schooling demographic standing outside in the dark. So naturally, out of those three choices, it becomes the high school students that get the short end of the stick, right? And what does that really mean? It means that in order to delay the start time for high school students and still keep the same school start times for junior high school and elementary school students, they would effectively have to hire more bus drivers, and they would even have to add more buses to their fleet. So again, at the end of the day, it's a money equation, right? So that's the second point. And the third and the last force that's fighting against delayed school time is actually the sporting industry. A lot of coaches, a lot of parents that have their children involved in sports, they're showing a lot of resistance to this idea because, I mean, they're used to everything being done at a certain time, right? And a delayed school start time would mean a delayed end time, and that would throw off all the schedules for their games. They would have less hours for practice. So there's a lot of pushback there, which I think is very interesting because there's a lot of evidence that says sleeping more reduces risks for injury, and it can even increase your performance for athletic activities.